The battle for Texas is this week. We're going to talk about that and more on this edition of the Bullpen.
To throw the punches away. He floats one wide open, and there he goes. Touchdown for a Texan touchdown.
Hello and welcome to the Bullpen. This one's audio only, and it is just me. Tom and I's schedules didn't line up, but it's me, James Roy, and I'm here to preview the Texans versus Cowboys matchup, the battle for Texas, as it is called by some, really most. And yeah, I mean, to me, realistically, a lot of this is going to be talking about the Texans because I feel like this game, just like this whole stretch of games coming up, kind of falls into this line of yeah, these are very winnable games. The Texans over the next 4 weeks could very easily be a 10-win team, but what have the Texans shown us so far this season to believe that that's a guarantee? And that's basically nothing. So to this point, we will talk about both sides, but for now, we'll start with this. I want to address what was said by DeMeco Ryans on Thursday in the press conference. He addressed how he wants to kind of let it loose and get CJ Stroud going. And to me, I feel like I'm probably in line with a lot of people on this one, where it seems like, okay, cool, say that to the press, like, and this whole narrative around DeMeco Ryans that's kind of popped up where some people are asking for his job, that's a bit extreme. But to go in front of the press and say that when you are the head coach of the team and could just very easily, you say you have input into the offensive game plan, just go tell Bobby that's what you want to do. And I've talked in the past about how I feel like Bobby Slowick kind of eases up on his game plan when CJ makes a mistake, and it's kind of this circular thing. It's what I aired out on our recap of the Texans-Lions game. But to me, I feel for a lot of people who have said that DeMeco's demeanor in addressing the press has been a little frustrating in terms of it's very consistent. It's the same. I'd feel better about it if the Texans had won any of those close games. But I mean, you also have to understand that it is a close game against a team that, the Texans weren't expected to compete with Nico Collins being out by a lot of people. And so all that to say, I think that DeMeco was probably trying to give people hope. And in the process, it just kind of comes across like, hey, dude, you're in the building. We all want to see that. You've described something that every fan wants to see. You're in the building. Go make it happen. Like, I don't know. That's how I see it. And so then with that, in the same area, CJ Stroud in his press conference said, "I'm not a game manager. I'm a game changer." To paraphrase, not a direct quote, but that one people took and run with. And now that's being talked about in a way where it's like, well, stop talking about it, do it. And all of this, I think, goes back to a lot of people are frustrated. They're speaking out emotionally instead of analyzing what's happened, which is that CJ, while not having had exactly the same year in terms of greatness as last year, is still doing really well. He's top 10 in passing yards and passing touchdowns, and is overall just in need of some help from a lot of factors, offensive line, offensive coordinator. And so, I mean, I think those are the things that are standing in the way. And then Jeremy Branham, I think, brought up a great point, which is that and Tom brought it up too in the past couple weeks, but it's worth re-mentioning that the Texans have not really seen Joe Mixon and Nico Collins on the field at the same time, except for one time this season. And so with that in mind, at least not for a whole game. And so with that in mind, this is the game where we're going to get that. Nico Collins is practicing and Joe Mixon is obviously not injured as it stands. And so we will get to see this offense at its highest level. And I think the reason why I understand the way Texans fans have been over the past couple weeks with this team is that even though there have been injuries, for me, most of them are defensive. A lot of the games that we're talking about, the injuries on the offensive side were not quite enough for me to be like, okay, we're not functioning. Like, if you think that Nico Collins is the only reason this team can go and is what makes CJ Stroud, then yeah, the Texans have been severely lacking. But I mean, I think that injuries are a poor excuse. This is a deep team that literally had built a receiving core and built itself around being deep. So to turn to that, I don't know if I like that excuse. But if that is your excuse, the team is relatively healthy. We'll see how Will Anderson Jr. does. Kamari Laster being out is a little concerning, but this is the game where we get to see a fully healthy Texans team going into Dallas. And I feel like this is a good moment to take a opportunity to look at Dallas as a team. This is a team that has not got Dak Prescott. And much similar to how you'd look at how CJ Stroud has performed without Nico Collins. We haven't really seen a whole lot from CeeDee Lamb without Dak Prescott. It's not to say you couldn't put it out there, but in these past couple weeks this past week without Dak Prescott, not exactly lighting the world on fire. And so this is presenting itself as a game that the Texans should very easily win. It could be, I mean, the Texans already basically put a wrench in Joe Flacco's career, and have at times with this defense been able to lock teams down. And so this is a recipe for that being the case. Will the Texans be able to do it? That's a whole nother story. But, this whole Dallas offense just does not scream production. And so even if Will Anderson Jr. doesn't play, we know that Christian Harris doesn't come back until after the bye week, which, I mean, honestly, the linebacker room is not something I've been super concerned about like I thought I would be all season. But this is a Cowboys offense that should be able to be handled. Now, this is the same Texans defense that gave up 300-yard games to Desmond Ridder and Zach Wilson last season, so I'm not calling it a sure thing. But it is setting up that way. It's setting up to be a matchup that should clearly be the Texans. The Texans are in line to win. As far as the defense goes, the Cowboys having Micah Parsons back, that's huge for them. There are some people that will tell you he's a little overrated. I don't know if I'm quite in that camp, but the impact of a quality edge rusher cannot be understated. And so I understanding what the Texans have struggled with in terms of protecting CJ Stroud, am hoping that it truly is what it has appeared to be, which is that the interior offensive line made some adjustments. I'm not going to say that they were great against the Lions, but the interior offensive line was better than it has been. And in general, the offensive line was better than it has been. And if that's the case, and Laramie Tunsil can play to his level and Titus Howard cannot try and strip sack CJ Stroud, we'll be in business on that end. So I'm not too incredibly concerned from there. Looking at the offensive side of the ball for the Texans, a big thing that comes to mind is the wide receiver room. There's a couple of things around that. John Mechie obviously managed to produce at a higher level than he ever has. He was the leading receiver for the Texans this past week. How does that translate with Nico Collins coming back? Does it come at the expense of Tank Dell? How does this wide receiver room shape up? This is tough to see because I would have told you this offseason that the Texans could have not acquired Stephon Diggs, could have just rolled into the season with Nico Collins and Tank Dell as their 1-2 punch and been good. And to watch Tank Dell struggle so mightily, I think once again you can trace it back to the root cause of offensive scheme or offensive line play, however you want to cut it. But at the end of the day, it's just been a less fun offense, less food to go around, if you will. There's a lot of mouths to feed, and so I think that'll play into. I don't think it's going to be Mechie and Tank Dell against Dallas. I think that it will be one or the other that manages to eat, and I'm interested to see which one that ends up being. I mean, I don't know. You got to ride the hot hand in some way, and Mechie did really have a solid second. It's interesting to see that the Texans didn't really go back to him much after that drive at the end of the first half. But overall, I mean, I don't care who gets the ball. I just care that the Texans can move it. This could shape up to be the game where CJ gets back on the 300-yard horse, manages to figure out, what he's doing passing wise. This is a Cowboys defense that has in the past been known for forcing interceptions, and CJ Stroud has seemed to find that I've said it before only because it's worth noting. I for one still think CJ is a top tier quarterback in this league, but the thing that you can look at CJ and say maybe he's taken a step back on is the elite ball placement that was his MO last season has kind of taken a step back. We saw that with the interception on when he was targeting Tank Dell last week against the Lions. Should have been a touchdown, just doesn't quite get the mustard on it and can't connect with Tank Dell in the end zone like he should on a ball that he usually does per what we know about him from his rookie season. And so those plays are plays that you have to make even against teams like Dallas and in the state that they're in. And so I'm interested to see how the Texans approach that. And overall, I think that the kicking matchup could end up playing an important role if the Texans can't figure it out, because they'll end up maybe having a field goal duel. And as good as Kaimi has been, he did miss the 58-yarder that would have made the Texans play for overtime, or at least affected the outcome of the game last week. So interested to see how that plays out. As far as a story time ending goes, a prediction, if you will. Tom's not here, so I can't get his prediction. Last week was the first time that we, as a show, have unanimously predicted against the Texans. We were both right, much as I would have rather had y'all saying I told you so. So with this week, I'll probably try and get Tom's prediction just so we have it. I reckon he'll probably predict the Texans to win here like I'm going to. And then I'll hit you with the storybook ending. I'm going to go, I don't want to go too high scoring, not because I don't think the Texans are capable of it, just because I think that at the end of the day, this might not be too high scoring. And that's to say relative to, I'm not going to go like 30 something to whatever I think the Cowboys are going to score. And I'm going to keep it a little closer because I don't think the Texans have given me any reason to believe that this could be a blowout. Rivalry stuff aside, I mean, I don't feel like the rivalry stuff rings as strong here because I just outside looking at the Cowboys fan base is so nationwide spread out that the regional aspect of the rivalry is hard to harp on. So it really just feels one-sided coming from us Texans fans. And I'd love to be proven wrong. I'd love to know that the Cowboys view the Texans as a rival, but I think that's just part of being a newer team in the league. And, if Tom was here, he'd probably have something to say about that, but he's not. So he doesn't have anything to say about that. But with my score prediction, I'll probably go 28-20, giving the Texans the win. And then I'll set the scene here for the storybook ending. The Texans are up 21-20. It's a hotly contested game. Maybe a couple mistakes all around, but the Texans have managed to win. It's not as frustrating as you would think it would be for the score being the way it is. I know a lot of Texans fans just look at the scoreboard maybe and get frustrated, but if you've watched the game, you're not super frustrated with where the Texans are at, just more frustrated that it's as close as it is because the Texans have looked really good. There's just been some things that didn't shake their way. The Cowboys have the ball, and they're sitting just outside of field goal range. We're approaching the 2-minute warning pretty fast, and the Cowboys are starting to try and run the clock. And the Texans have, called a timeout going into the 2-minute warning, maybe to try and preserve some clock. And it's a 3rd and 4. Cooper Rush drops back to pass, rolls right, and throws it. He's just trying to get the first down, trying to sustain the drive. And who's there? Who other than Jalen Petrie, who then returns the ball the whole way 60 yards for a touchdown. And that pretty much ices it. The Cowboys get the ball back, and they are within one score. They could drive down the field, but it's the whole how you feel when you have your backup quarterback in and you're you're hopeful that he might do something, but it's not like we're giving the ball to Dak Prescott with 2 minutes left, which, I mean, I don't know. Dak Prescott's not necessarily known for being fourth quarter comeback guy. But I mean, they're not in a good spot to do it. It's a very quick 3-and-out. The Texans take the game 28-20, and that is my final score prediction. Well, thanks for tuning in to, I feel like this is a pretty short episode. It's hard to keep them, longer without Tom to bounce off of. But thanks for tuning in. It's audio only, mainly because I didn't really have a space to set up for video. Hoping to remedy that soon. But yeah, make sure you're looking at my Instagram. I've got a subscription, giving away a Texans H hat. I should really push that more on Instagram, but I haven't really had the chance to. But make sure that you get in on that. It's $1 a month, giving away different Texans, gear each month. Hoping to get a larger subscription following so that I can give away a bigger prize. But for now, that is what I have. And then, as always, you can find me at M1 Texans fan on Instagram, and you can also find me at James Roy NFL on Twitter. Tom's not here, but I'll go ahead and plug his socials anyway. It's at Third Coast Tom on Twitter and at TC Tom1 on Instagram. And we make up The Bullpen, the best Houston Texans podcast around, in my personal opinion. And I'd hope you share the same opinion. And yeah, make sure you find us wherever you find your podcast. If you want to listen, watch, however you want to do it. And as always, stay classy, Houston, and vamos Texans. Thanks for tuning into The Bullpen, a Texans podcast. Please like, comment, subscribe, and follow along for more Texans talk from The Bullpen.